After riding on the success of its first flagship killer of a smartphone, Chinese OEM OnePlus released its second smartphone in the late summer of 2015. While OnePlus immediately touted the device as the 2016 flagship killer, its initial release was marred by production delays, along with the company's infamous invite system, on top of controversy surrounding the phone's Qualcomm Snapdragon 810 power plant and the OnePlus 2's lack of near-field communication technology. Now that OnePlus has unveiled the OnePlus 3, how does OnePlus's mid-summer 2016 flagship stack up against its predecessor? How's it going, everybody? This is Matt D, and this is OnePlus 2 versus OnePlus 3. The OnePlus 2 has a 5.5-inch 1080p IPS LCD display with a pixel density of 401 ppi. Above the display you'll find the phone's earpiece with the phone's 5-megapixel camera near the top right corner. Moving down below the display, OnePlus's flagship from 2015 has a capacitive fingerprint scanner, flanked by capacitive buttons whose actions can be determined by the user. Continuing the tour around the OnePlus 2, OnePlus placed a 3.5mm headphone jack at the top left edge of its second flagship killer. On the right side, the volume rocker sits above the phone's power button. On the bottom, there's a USB Type-C charging port, something brand new at the time of the OnePlus 2's release. There's also a single speaker adjacent to that port. Finally, on the left edge, OnePlus has built its trademark alert slider into the cool metal side rail of the device. On the rear of OnePlus's second album, as OnePlus co-founder Carl Pei once called it, the OnePlus 2 houses a 13-megapixel sensor by OmniVision with an aperture of f2.0. The sensor has optical image stabilization and laser autofocus, while the camera is accompanied by a dual LED flash. On the inside, OnePlus's second flagship handset is powered by Qualcomm's controversial Snapdragon 810 system on a chip, accompanied by an Adreno 430 GPU. The device also boasts 4GB of LPDDR4 RAM for multitasking. Looking at the phone's connectivity options, the OnePlus 2 supports a wealth of LTE bands for both North America and Europe. Finally, one of the major points of controversy surrounding this device is that the OnePlus 2 does not support near-field communication. More on that shortly. With its second flagship killer, OnePlus included a removable backplate that snugly attaches to the device. Underneath that swappable backplate, you'll have access to a dual nano SIM tray, though the phone's 3300 mAh battery is non-removable. If you don't like the trademark sandstone backplate that comes with the phone, OnePlus offers a variety of backplates in other textures that can be fastened to the rear of the phone. Fast forward to 2016, and OnePlus continued to stay on the bleeding edge while dropping the flagship killer moniker. The company took a new approach in designing its third flagship smartphone. This time around, OnePlus opted for an all-metal design with a sealed-in battery, giving a premium feel in the hand. While OnePlus left the power button on the right side of its summer 2016 flagship, the company placed the phone's volume rocker on the left-hand side below OnePlus's popular alert slider. While the OnePlus 2 had a 3.5mm headphone jack along its top edge, its successor sports an auxiliary jack on its bottom, along with the phone's USB Type-C port and lone speaker. In contrast to its predecessor, the OnePlus 3 comes with a 5.5-inch 1080p optic AMOLED display with a pixel density of 401 ppi. I feel OnePlus made the right decision in switching to an AMOLED panel, as the phone's Samsung manufactured display offers saturated colors and better contrast ratios. Plus, individually lit pixels allow for a better execution of ambient display notifications. Continuing with our tour around the OnePlus 3, there's an 8-megapixel front-facing camera to the left of the phone's earpiece. Below the display is OnePlus's lightning-fast fingerprint scanner for biometric security. Like its predecessor, the OnePlus 3 features user-definable capacitive buttons that flank the fingerprint scanner. A minor difference between the two devices is that while the capacitive keys on the older phone are marked by illuminated lines, the buttons on the newer phone are represented by small dots that will light up. Beneath its premium metal exterior, the OnePlus 3 is powered by a Qualcomm Snapdragon 820 system on a chip, backed up by an Adreno 530 GPU and an unheard-of 6GB of RAM. Like the OnePlus 2, OnePlus's mid-2016 flagship phone offers 64GB non-expandable storage. While the phone's 3000 mAh battery is sealed inside the phone's metal exterior, OnePlus offers minimally protective cases for the device in the same textures of its predecessor's accessory backplates. Examining the OnePlus 3's connectivity options, the phone supports a wide range of LTE bands in addition to the usual A, B, G, N, and AC Wi-Fi. In addition to the standard GPS and Bluetooth version 4.2, the OnePlus 3 does have support for near-field communication, unlike its predecessor. Therefore, it appears that OnePlus has learned from the backlash that it received after omitting NFC on the OnePlus 2. So feel free to use Android Pay and Tasker to your heart's content with the OnePlus 3. At the time of filming, the older phone is running OnePlus's Oxygen OS atop Android 6.0.1 Marshmallow. If you've seen my previous coverage on these devices, you'll know that OnePlus's lightweight Android skin offers a stock Android look and feel with small added value customizations built in. For starters, OnePlus has included its shelf panel at the OS's leftmost home screen. In addition to that, Oxygen OS was one of the first Android skins to allow the end user to modify the toggles in the Android notification shade. In addition to that, OnePlus actually beat Google to the punch in adding user-configurable app permissions into the operating system. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that the fingerprint scanners on these two devices are flanked by user-defined navigation keys. For example, an individual used to the stock Android navigation button layout, like myself, can set the left capacitive key as a back button and use the right button to access the recent apps screen. On the other hand, someone more accustomed to Samsung's button layout may prefer to set those two buttons in the exact opposite configuration. Like many other Android skins on the market, Oxygen OS brings support for a handful of on-screen gestures. For example, there's a double tap to wake gesture along with other gestures to control the camera, flashlight, and music playback. In addition to the gestures, OnePlus has added a system-wide dark UI mode into Oxygen OS, which provides deep blacks on the phone's display. Lastly, Oxygen OS gives the user the opportunity to modify colors of the phone's notification LED on a per-app basis. Moving over to the now discontinued OnePlus 3, that device has recently been updated to Oxygen OS 4.0 built atop Android 7.0 Nougat. This newer take on OnePlus's vision of Android brings with it most of OnePlus's aforementioned Android customizations, this time fused with Google's latest flavor of Android. For example, this new release of Oxygen OS brings with it Android's new notification shade stretching all the way across the OnePlus 3's screen. In addition to that, the OnePlus 3 and the newer 3T now support Android Nougat's multi-window functionality. Finally, I want to point out that Oxygen OS 4.0 gives the user control over DPI scaling. The 5 levels of scaling allow text and icons to shrink, allowing the user to include more icons and widgets on the phone's home screen. While the DPI scaling has changed, the persistent Google search bar has disappeared. Overall, those were just the main highlights of Oxygen OS 4.0. While I only scratched the surface in this comparison, I'll discuss Oxygen OS 4.0 in greater detail in my full review of the OnePlus 3. As I mentioned previously, the OnePlus 2 has a 13-megapixel rear camera by OmniVision with an aperture of f2.0. The sensor also includes laser autofocus and optical image stabilization. As for video quality, the 2's rear camera will shoot video in up to 4K resolution. Moving around to the front of the device, the OnePlus 2 features a 5-megapixel selfie shooter with an aperture of f2.4, while it'll shoot video in up to 1080p resolution at 30 frames per second. OnePlus's flagship for the first half of 2016 comes with a 16-megapixel rear camera with an aperture of f2.0, phase detection autofocus, and optical image stabilization. Below the camera, there's a single LED flash. Looking at the OnePlus 3's front-facing camera, the phone's secondary camera has an 8-megapixel sensor with an aperture of f2.0, while it'll shoot video in up to 1080p resolution at 30 frames per second, just like its predecessor. The Oxygen OS camera app comes packed to the gills with features to satisfy the smartphone photography enthusiast. A settings button on one side of the shutter button reveals a menu giving the user control over aspect ratio, a timer, and a grid for using the rule of thirds. On the opposite side of the screen, there's a menu button presenting a long list of shooting modes such as time-lapse, slow motion, panorama, and a manual shooting mode. As you might expect, the manual shooting mode allows you to change white balance, ISO, exposure, and shutter speed, but not much beyond those settings. Here are some sample pictures taken on both devices. Both of these phones by OnePlus provided snappy, fluid performance when navigating through Oxygen OS and opening and closing apps. While the OnePlus 2's 4GB of RAM is nothing to scoff at, the OnePlus 3 consistently opened apps faster than its older counterpart. As I've done in my previous comparisons, I compared gaming performance on OnePlus's 2015 and 2016 flagships while playing Asphalt 8, Need for Speed Most Wanted, and Leo's Fortune. Both phones were able to endure long periods of gameplay while dropping minimal amounts of frames. The OnePlus 3 got noticeably warmer than its predecessor thanks to the newer phone's all-metal exterior. Overall, while the OnePlus 3 may be able to retain more apps in its memory, both devices perform well in everyday use. While I appreciate the all-metal design of the newer OnePlus 3, I honestly prefer the thicker frame of the OnePlus 2. The body of the newer phone is just too thin for my taste, making the phone tougher to grip when shooting pictures or video with the rear camera. Rather than competing with Apple's obsession of having the thinnest smartphone on the market, OnePlus should have eliminated the camera hump by including a bigger battery. I really don't see any benefit of having a thinner than average smartphone with mediocre battery life. On the other hand, I'm very happy that OnePlus has brought back NFC with its newer device, along with the company's dash charge technology. Like I said in my OnePlus 3 So Far video, when OnePlus claimed that the OnePlus 3 could charge from 0 to 60% in 30 minutes, they weren't kidding. While both devices perform exceptionally well in everyday use and even gaming, the OnePlus 3's metal exterior allows the phone to get very warm when the phone's Snapdragon 820 is handling a heavy load. Despite the thermal throttling controversy surrounding the Snapdragon 810 powering the older phone, I don't experience the same excessive heat with the OnePlus 2. Perhaps the textured backplate on the OnePlus 2 dissipates heat better than the metal exterior of its successor. Overall, the OnePlus 3 is an excellent premium mid-range smartphone of exceptional build quality with powerful top-performing components. The phone offers a great camera, a lightning-quick fingerprint scanner, and OnePlus's own dash charge technology. On the other hand, the older OnePlus 2 is a decent alternative for the Android enthusiast on a budget. The OnePlus 2 offers a bigger battery and a thicker frame than its successor. Although the phone is a year and a half old at the time of filming, the OnePlus 2 was one of the first smartphones on the market with 4GB of RAM and a USB Type-C charging port. However, anyone who makes heavy use of mobile payments or automation apps should avoid the OnePlus 2 as it does not have support for near-field communication technology. As always, if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up down below and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos in the future. It's totally free. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.